You know, basically what we're going to do, we have about an hour with folks. And so we do want to take some time, probably no more than 20 minutes, as Karen said, to take them through this journey map and reflect back what we heard from our research, the different perceptions that people had of the service, as well as the fact that these principles are really key themes that emerged. You know, people were talking about the need to feel in control, to have information that is real time, sorry, my eyes are really bad, to have a very caring service, transparency, reliability, flexibility. And so what we want to do is take people through this. And so again, being sensitive to different people's needs, we may need to sort of, read through this for folks, especially those who do have visual impairments, so that they understand what some of the points are. And as Karen said, it's really to just sort of acknowledge this is what we heard, and then maybe take a moment or two to say, is there anything, that maybe you wanted to add to this that you feel is really important to know? We have to sort of be careful about that, because that could open up a Pandora's box. So this is where you really want to be careful of time, where you just want to acknowledge what we've said, see if anybody has anything else that they want to add to that, and then but quickly sort of move on. Because what we want to do is take about 30 to 35 minutes to do what we're calling this solution-oriented brainstorm. And so this transition, I mean, we've kind of given a script here, but basically we want to say, although it seems like we could spend the entire evening identifying the problems, what we really want to do is spend our time together working on solutions. So now we're going to switch gears. We're going to keep the same energy flowing, but now we're going to try something that's a little bit more constructive, and we're going to share our thoughts with the rest of the group. And what will happen at this point is that each table will be asked to zoom in on one of these particular touch point areas. So your table might be looking at application and assessment, or booking a trip, waiting for a ride. Those are the assignments that Karen and Camila are going to be working on tonight. And so you'll say, so we've talked about the whole journey, but now we're going to zoom in on, on booking a trip. And so this is where you might want to start to engage the team and sort of say, does somebody want to be the secretary to help jot down ideas? And if so, make sure they've got a marker and some Post-it notes. The other thing that we might want to say is, since we are going to be sharing out with the team, is there's somebody here who wants to volunteer to be our spokesperson. And so see if somebody speaks up. We might even, if there's a member of the Paratransit Advisory Committee there, maybe nominate them. But if people are feeling uncomfortable with that, then that's where we as facilitators might need to sort of like reflect back. But we would love to have the participants do this as much as possible. So the ideation is going to be broken down into sort of 3 steps. And the first step should only take about 10 minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, so if we're taking a look at booking a trip, when you think about this moment in the journey, which of the attributes, the 6 attributes at the top of the screen, do you feel is most important in this moment in time, and why? And so what you'll do is you'll give them to work individually, take about a minute or 2 to think about that. And you can encourage people to jot down their thoughts on a Post-it note, but certainly if people don't want to do that, that's okay. And certainly if somebody has a visual impairment, this is where the facilitator might want to work with them one-on-one to just sort of talk through their ideas. Again, just keep it to 1 to 2 minutes. This is really about prioritizing the attribute that they feel is most important to the ideal experience. And so once you've given them a minute or 2 to think, then you'll go around and each person shares which attribute or design principle that they chose and why. Again, this will be pretty quick. It should probably take only about 5 or 8 minutes, because we have about 5 or 6 people sitting at the table. And this is something too that MTA folks, we encourage you to participate, because this is why we call this co-design. So we would love your thoughts thrown into the mix. And so now we'll start to have a basis of what are the attributes that we think are most important. We start to get a sense of why. And then we move into the next step, which is really going to take the bulk of the time. And so what you will say is, okay, so you chose transparency during booking as being, most important to you, and everybody may have different ideas. So basically what you're asking the individuals to do is take that attribute that they felt was most important to them, and now think about what you think it might take to make the current experience more transparent, or whatever their attribute is. So now it's starting to get them to think about ideas. Again, you want to give them some time to think about it. And this could be a moment where instead of working individually, you encourage people to pair up. Especially if you notice when people were sharing in step one that there was a lot of repetition of the most important attribute. If there are a couple people who chose transparency and a couple of people who chose real time or something else, maybe you have them partner up and just spend 3 to 5 minutes thinking about, well, what would need to happen with, I'll keep using the example of booking a trip to make it feel more real time. And so again, encourage people to jot their ideas on sticky notes. But again, if they're not comfortable, that's okay. And then you'll take turns, everybody sort of sharing back what, either individuals or as teams sharing back what they came up with. I think the other important note I should say is that as people are sharing back, if they didn't put something on a sticky note, this is where we as facilitators, we should be jotting that down. And generally the best practice is one idea or one thought per sticky note. So at the end of step 2, we should have not only prioritized sort of principles or attributes for what should be happening at this particular point in the customer journey. And now we start to have some ideas about what it would take to make that phase of the journey feel more like transparency or real time or what have you. And then if we have time, you might want to add in step 3. And so step 3 is really about capturing analogous, what we call analogous companies or services. So the way that you would sort of maybe facilitate this is, okay, so we have all these ideas. Can you think of any companies or services that you've encountered that best exemplify the solutions you're proposing? And so again, it's about, starting to understand, like they might say, well, if I want something real time, I want it to be like, I'm going to use Uber. Uber's come up a lot, but so again, it's drawing on experiences that they've encountered to start to get some ideas, and you can sort of facilitate that conversation. And so this way we now have a couple different components that people can then present back to their team. And that should probably fit pretty nicely within the 30-minute period of time. I'm just going to pause there in case anybody has any questions or, around that. I went through that really quickly.
I'm sorry, this is Barbara at Oak.
Yes.
Hi. So my question was, if you can just scroll up to step 1 for a second.
Yes.
So here we are, if the question that's being posed is to identify a particular moment in the journey and an attribute of it, right? So is the question to the table, an individual question for each of them?
No.
Each of the participants?
No, so what you're going to say to the participants, so let's say it's actually pickup, and I just scrolled up to the picture. So if that's the area that you've been asked to look at in the journey.
Oh, I see.
And so what you'll say to them is, so when you think about that moment of waiting for, of the pickup, or actually let me go to waiting for a ride, that might be a little easier. When you think about that moment of waiting for a ride, which of these 6 attributes do you think is most important to have at that moment in time? Is it about being in control? Is it about being real time? Take a moment to think about that and think about why that attribute is most important to you. So you're really asking for their individual perspective on that moment in time. And then as they, yep. Cool, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I think I missed the part because it came in a little bit late. I missed that the particular, it was already identified, that the step was identified already.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll, I think Karen and Camila are working on those, like each table will be assigned one of the moments in that customer journey. And so, so they're going to finish those assignments, and so that we should know by tonight or very early tomorrow what area that we're going to be looking at. So that way we have a moment to sort of calibrate our own thinking around that moment in the journey.
I see, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Hello. Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So Elizabeth, one question in step 3. So is it connected with step 2? I mean, so we ask them to think solutions and then also elaborate based on companies or service that they and related, or it's just totally different step when we can actually discuss about new things or things in the future.
Yeah, on step 2, I would just focus on what their idea. So if they chose real time as most important when they are waiting for their trip. And so what do you think, what would need to happen to make that moment in time feel more real time? So just have them focus on that solution and then have that conversation as different people share out. And then I would layer in the analog, because I think it may be a lot to pack in one step. And if we don't have time to get to analogs, that's okay. It's just sort of like an added bonus if we have time. I think it's more important that we ask participants to problem solve and start to, like we've heard a lot of their frustrations. So now we're sort of saying, well, okay, if you sort of had the opportunity, what would you do to make this moment feel more real time or feel more transparent? Thank you, Karen.
Great. No, because I was thinking that probably maybe that extra step could maybe open another world, like different type of discussions, and maybe you can talk about companies or services or a lot of things that maybe is out of focus.
So you bring up a really good point, Leandro, and I guess that's where, as facilitators, we've all had experience with that. We just sort of have to gauge the how it's going at our table. So you bring up a really good point. It may be that as people are thinking about things, if they feel like they're getting stuck, or if when they share out their ideas, it seems like they're kind of high level or something like that, then I think we should feel comfortable as facilitators to bring in that analog as another, introduce that if we need to during step 2, just to maybe prime the exercise. I just would be careful about throwing too many pieces there at once, because it may, it just may get a little overwhelming for folks. But, I think that's one of the things that facilitators can kind of make those judgment calls in real time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. I guess from the Oats team, I just wanted to throw out, because obviously you've worked an awful lot with some of the folks that we're going to be talking with tomorrow. Are there any thoughts or things that you might recommend to tweak this? Does this feel right? Are there any sort of things that you think we should be mindful of when we're facilitating?
This is Alex from Oats. I think we just have to be careful to try and keep it on track and kind of keep the energy and positivity up. I think, like it's been mentioned a couple of times that there could be some, contentious areas here, but I think that our role in this to keep things kind of oriented around the issue that we've been assigned is probably the most or the best foot forward. So, I mean, we're all pretty good at working in small groups, and, we have a lot of experience working with older adults. So I think we'll be able to kind of, manage the groups in harmony. So I think it'll be okay. I just think we have to try and keep things on track and on time as well.
We had a couple questions here. Go ahead, Tish. Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, one of the question was on the journey. Let's say one of the topics that I'm involved in, like we're waiting for my ride. Is the attributes going to be there, particularly a couple of them, or do the customers or whoever the people are at the table is going to have to guess a couple of the attributes?
That's a really great question. So we have the attributes. I've scrolled back up to the, they're part of the map, so they'll be on the map, but we will also have individually printed cards with these same attributes, and they'll be printed so that they're a little bit more like in, so they're a little bit more friendly for people with visual impairments. So we'll have both individual cards at the table as well as them up on the board. And I think as facilitators, we can also reinforce that these are the 6 attributes that we'd like you to think about, like which one is most important. What we want to try and avoid is introducing a new one necessarily.
Yeah.
But
Agreed.
Can we get a copy of this card? Not just in here, because in this shot it doesn't look like we can read all these little boxes on the bottom. Can we get like a 1-page?
Yeah, I'm gonna send out a PDF of this whole facilitator's guide after this meeting. I'm going to attach the PDF of this template that will be printed on the and posted on easels, and I'll also provide a link to this training video.
There was also, we had some discussion here about, mobility issues. So, I mean, we're not looking for the customers to, who are present to move around very much, right?
Not at all. They will come, they will go to their table, and that will be the extent of their moving around.
Yeah, and also some of them, communicate slowly also. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, we have someone who's pretty profoundly disabled in terms of speaking, but he is accompanied by a PCA who has a outstanding ability to translate. We'll say, yeah, that's right.
But also, he has a lot of knowledge and understanding.
He's a smart person, very smart. Just the disability is verbal. Yeah, it's pretty profound. But hopefully we won't have too many of those. We do have actually a few people who do not have a disability, but are true stakeholders. They're big advocates within the disability community who will be some of them at the tables.
Yeah, I suggested that I sit with Rappaport, maybe Gene, if he's going to be there.
Okay.
Some of the bigger bidders.
Can we go back to that part where you mentioned that you're asking if anybody in the table wants to be a secretary?
yep.
So you plan to ask them if they want to take everybody's notes?
Not everybody show the most well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just, it's something that we can ask if we feel that we're uncomfortable asking. It's sometimes having somebody help out by jotting some of the notes is just a good way of keeping people engaged. But if you feel like that might be, given the dynamic of some of the folks that we having, that might be putting people on the spot, we can take that out.
Hi, this is Kim from Oates. I think it'll be helpful, Karen and Elizabeth, if we explain the share out process, because then they'll understand what the notes are being written for. I think we skipped that step, and it might be helpful to put it in context, right? Like why we're taking notes, or what any of the written or the collective group discussions are actually creating, and why it's important to have a record of them, however that record is kept at the table.
But also, I think a lot of the disabilities, even if it's not mobility issues, I think a lot of the disabilities are going to really preclude really having them do any of that.
I think they come to really focus on participating and communicating their discontent or ideas in this forum. So I think the other minute issues, we should really focus in on that.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think that anyone from any of the MTA participants should be relied on that either. I mean, I think so. Maybe if the facilitators can do that, that would, I think, be the most helpful.
Yeah, I think that the facilitators are going to have their hands full just making the flow move. But I think that if you're flagging that it's unlikely that people will be able to fulfill those tasks, and maybe that also flows over to completing the post-it notes. Facilitators can be taking notes, and then we certainly will be having facilitators capture what happened in their session. So, we have limitations and constraints. So, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
We'll just do the best we can. I mean, that's the bottom line, right?
Yep. I'm mindful of time, and Kimberly, you brought up a really important point. So let's talk a little bit about what happens for the share out.
That part, Kimberly?
Sure. So we're hoping that, each of the tables, unfortunately, we could spend an hour probably recreating every discussion that every table had, but we're really excited to have a conversation at the end that may be brief, but that each table is able to report to the rest of the room what solutions they came up with. So the introduction, we kind of went over quickly because you'll have a chance to read it, but the real kind of takeaway of this entire discussion is for people to have the freedom to think about solutions that they would like to see happen. So the notes that we're taking, be it a facilitator or somebody at the table, are just going to keep track of the points that the group or the points that came up from the individuals at the table that seem the most important or the most relevant to share with everybody at the end. So just for, it's going to be about 3 minutes. So if the table that had waiting for a ride would say, I think my example, I gave some techie examples in the introduction where I said, for example, if you're waiting for a ride and your table would like to play free games on your smartphone while you're waiting for a ride, that could be something that's jotted down on a note, stuck up on the solutions part of those boards at the table, and then shared out to the rest of the group. So after the discussion's over, each group will have a person who will report. So they'll stand up and they'll present. We'll say, okay, table, waiting for a ride. The facilitator or one of the members of the Paratransit Action Committee, if they'd like to, can be the person to report, and they would just read out loud the solutions that their table came up with. So everyone can benefit from the richness of the conversations that happen. There won't be a discussion after them or a lot of elaboration or questions, but it'll be their opportunity to report their solutions.
Hey, Kim, Marisa here. I have a quick question. Based on what you said, it sounds like there's going to be a decision process, like which things to report. Is that going to be up to the discretion of the facilitator? Should it be put to a vote to the people, who are discussing it? Just so we're all clear on what the process is.
Oh, that's a good question. So what I think we said is, just the notes, I can't move the screen up, but in the notes we suggested that unless something is, something that's totally contentious or weird, there's really no reason why all of the ideas wouldn't be reported, right? So if something is, and I guess this is also just to have a bit of flexibility with the group, because some groups may be a little bit tacit and some groups may have 400 ideas. So the idea is to keep, the reporting piece within 3 minutes or so. But if that means you read 3 great ideas that someone had or 30 random ideas, I think that'll be a little bit up to you guys. And anything that reports or reflects back what your group kind of collectively decided. So I hope it won't be a competition. This isn't actually something anyone will vote on or any type of competitive piece to it, but I think that it's worth maybe grouping ideas. So maybe some ideas are very high tech and some ideas are very much about the process. So you might, as a facilitator, present those in kind of separate chunks. But definitely I wouldn't be concerned about any kind of competitive aspect to that.
Yeah, and I think time is an important variable. Of course it's an important variable. It is an important variable, especially for this community. We want to make sure that the event runs on time and that we can release people at 7 o'clock because they will have rides coming to pick them up. Although some people may linger and want to stay, which is fine. We do want to make sure that everybody has a complete experience. So timekeeping will be very important, and I'll be doing my best to help Kimberly with that, but we want to make sure that everybody knows to have an eye toward that. Like 3 minutes, I think by nature we all try to hit that 3-minute mark, but if we try to hit the 2.5-minute mark, that's actually the best way to play it.
Okay.
I just want to confirm. So steps 1 to 3, these questions. So NPA staff is going to respond with our own answers?
We would like, Elizabeth, do you want to speak to it or do you want me to?
I'll let you. You started in.
So we want to really hear as much as possible from the customers who are at the table, and we want your team to be part of that conversation. But I think that the most powerful, they're stepping up and stepping back, and I think that the ideal thing is for you to be present and to step back and allow the customers really to lead and to add ideas, you know, selectively where possible. But we all know that in a group dynamic, say there's 7 people at every table, you know, it's in the amount of time we have, there's not a lot of talking that can happen. So giving priority to the customers is what we're looking for.
Makes sense.
I think we're just assisting because she's going to take, the facilitator's going to take the lead.
I think it's also important that you have to be listening to. Right. And I think that's really what the point of it is.
Right.
So we're just there to listen. I just don't want them to feel like, oh, we're just here, we're not participating with them.
I think you should, you know, I think you should be part of the conversation.
Just don't take it over.
Yeah, just don't lead the conversation.
That's going to be tough for me.
So we should tell everybody, all the MPA staff, but.
Exactly. The facilitators are there to facilitate, and then the hope is that the paratransit customers will do the most talking, but you absolutely are there to participate. It's just a consciousness around, you know, the weight that we want the paratransit customers really to have their voices be the primary voices. But it's not to say that you're not talking at all. We want it.
No, sounds great.
Great. Okay, well then I'm going to package this all up and send it off to everyone, and you can distribute to other members of your team. And then many of us will be meeting at 2 p.m. tomorrow at 2 Broadway for the run of show walkthrough. That's going to happen on the 20th floor in a conference room at the end of the hall. And then we're going to start getting set up, and then it'll be 4 o'clock, and the participants will start arriving. And I'm really excited. Does anyone else have one word they want to share in terms of an intention for tomorrow? Leandro, what's your word?
Empathy.
Empathy. Good. Who else?
Fun.
Oh, fun! Ah! There's that F-bomb again from Brian. Camila?
I would say warm.
Warm. Mike, do you have a word?
Forward.
Forward. Huh. Natalie?
Happy?
Comforting.
What was that one?
Comforting.
Okay. Well, who else at paratransit has a word?
Success.
Success, right.
Great.
New paradigm.
Word.
Make it hyphenated.
Yeah.
Neo paradigm.
Oates, do you have words you want to share?
Patience,
Patience.
creativity,
Great.
Active listening.
Great.
Okay, thank you. We will see you tomorrow at 2.
Okay, we didn't get Elizabeth's word. Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth.
I don't know whether stories. I love hearing the stories.
I'm sorry. Is the time 2 or 4?
For Oates.
2 for the meeting on the 20th floor.
No, it's 4 for facilitators, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for facilitators.
Aaron?
The facilitators. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.